welcome back to the channel. A lot has changed since, well, yesterday basically, the day before, and well, let me show you what I got. So if you remember, this is where we left off with the rough estimate in the front driveline. Okay, so you know where the half shafts, the diff, the through shaft, and then the coupling on the other side for the other half shaft. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take out, that is the OEM transmission tunnel. Oh, the camera's focusing. The OEM transmission bracket over there. And it looks like this Adventura transfer case bolts right into that spot. If you look at this. Uh-oh. Here. So, with that being said, since it looks like it pretty much bolts in the car in the same spot, I'm going to just do that and use that as another point of reference for the front drive shaft. And the reason that's important is while there's nothing in the way, it's easier to eyeball right about, excuse me, the space I have and what I'm going to need for this. So we're going to do that. I found some wheel spacers that I had on the front when I was trying to mock up the track, so to speak, on the front that I don't need anymore. I have these. And I'm going to put these on the rear, okay? And the reason I'm going to do that is so, if you can see, try to get the rear rims out some to kind of see where these fall. Obviously, now understand, I know people get triggered with wheel spacers and stuff, but none of this stuff is necessarily permanent. It's just me trying to figure out roughly where stuff's going to land and where it's going to fit and how, so I can make a plan ahead. Now, I do have some bad news. I did not get the engine brackets for the engine to bolt into the K-member. I did find plenty of mock-up blocks, aluminum ones even, 5.3, you know, blocks. That one is otherwise good, but needs to be bored 30 over one cylinder, which is whatever. I just need the block for like $100. But I don't have brackets. So Alex is looking for those. He said that the guy he got this front end from doesn't have any on hand. And if you didn't know, the Adventure is actually pretty popular in Australia. I'd say it's arguably a cult car, if you will. Like the GTO in and of itself, it's got a very unique following, but the Adventure is actually an amazing off-road car for what it is. And all around great, just like the GTOs were, arguably. They were just bland looking, right? So we might not have brackets, and I'm not really trying to wait for brackets. And since I've found an aluminum block, you know, just a plain 5.3 aluminum block, I'm probably just going to make them, because all I need is that block to bolt this very dirty oil pan and the associated pieces from the front together to put in here, or at least hang over here with the engine crane that I have. And since I have half shafts here and here, when I put all this together through the oil pan, I can kind of roughly figure out where the engine sat as best I can. And once I do that, just see what happens. I will obviously contact some guys in Australia to take some pictures of their engine bays and the subframes and stuff, kind of get a rough idea of where everything sat. Because if I have to make brackets, that's gonna change some things, since I don't know where this is supposed to sit. Which brings me to my next point. This transfer case was designed to fit behind a 4L65, which came in the GTO, and is an extremely unpopular transmission depending on who you talk to. That transmission's come a long way. And I might be able to get, well actually I know I can get a 4L65 for probably free or close to free. And if it's what I think it is, they should all more or less be the same, with the exception of the back half where the tail shaft would be. And this should bolt up. I'll check all this before I get anything, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And if that is the case, then what I'll have to do is take this transfer case, since I know where that will fall. That's got a mount bracket on it, which should bolt directly to the car, which will put it where it needs to be. Get a 4L65 that theoretically should bolt to this some kind of way. and then that will bolt to the mock-up block on top of everything else that's already in here, which will put the engine basically where it needs to be. And then it's just a matter of height at that point, which we can kind of play with and see where we're at. I don't have a whole lot of side-to-side movement, obviously, because, well, I mean, it's all drive, so these half shafts have to be a particular way. But I have a little bit of play up and down, like any engine, because if you know, like back in the day when the GTOs first came out, if the guys were supercharging them, and in some cases, particularly with the 04s, the blowers were touching the hood, so they made lower mounts to lower the engines into the engine bay to clear the hood. And, you know, guys ran whipples and whatever. So I don't think playing with the engine height is going to be that big of a deal, especially if I'm making the mounts, my brackets myself, or with some help. But that's the best solution I can come up with to solve this issue and continue making progress with the car. The other thing, caveat to that, is if I run a 4L65, I won't need an adapter for a TR6060. However, the 4L65 won't necessarily be as strong as a TR6060. Obviously, it won't be as cool because, I mean, stick car. But for the purposes of making this bracket, these engine brackets I need, I might have to at least acquire one for mock-up so I can put the engine brackets right about where they need to be at, plus move the rack and all that kind of stuff and see, you know, how the cards fall, so to speak. So we'll kind of see where we're at. But for now, I'll drop this transfer case in, see if I can roughly finger tight the front shaft, which will also, I didn't think about that, bolting the front shaft to the diff will push the diff where it needs to be at in the front, which could save me from having to get a 4L65 like I just said, because then the diff will be right where it's supposed to be at. The half shafts can be plopped in, and then it's just a matter of figuring out height like that as well. So that's also a possibility. But anyway, let me throw this T-case in. It's only 3 bolts. And there's literally nothing there. And then I'll put the shims on and kind of see where we're at. All right, that's done. I didn't do a whole lot of stuff, but I did accomplish some things by answering some questions. So I'll go ahead and go over that, and then we'll talk about a plan ahead. So here's what I got. I got this squared up as best as I could, sitting there, half shafts and everything. But what I also did was I managed to find 2 bolt holes, because the third one just doesn't exist on this car, obviously. But the main 2 do, and I bolted in the transfer case, and I used jack stands to support the back and the driver's side of it. The front drive shaft, as you can see, is not as big of an issue as everyone assumed it was. And by everyone, I mean the ones who say people thought about it but didn't do it, and, you know, the sun and the moon and the stars, whatever. So we'll get underneath there and we'll look at that a little closer here in a second. It looks a lot simpler than all of the assumptions I saw about this particular swap on the internet. And the more I get into this, the more excited I get, because it's like, okay, well, if this is what it really is, then why didn't somebody do this sooner? And if they did, why didn't they document it? Because, I mean, who knows how many of these we could have running around the States right now on no prep and grudge events, doing all kinds of crazy things by just ordering some parts from overseas. But anyway, so here we are. So here's what I got. I probably should have brought the flashlight. These 2 bolts here, if you're familiar with the bottom of the GTO, there are 1, 2, there's like 3 or 4 bolt holes over here. I want to say there's 3. These front 2 bolt up just fine, okay? And then the bracket goes across. There's this piece here that bolts to the back there. You see the holes there? But there are no provisions for something to be screwed into on the car, obviously, because they don't exist. But the bracket, let's see, I'm trying to hold it up here. The bracket more or less goes there, as you can see. The bracket does line up, the bolt holes line up there, and then up the front there. So that's the least of my concern, because that's got to move further back anyways with the TR6060, and I'll have to make some sort of mounting provisions, probably a stud. I'll either weld the screw or drill a hole and fish the screw through, weld it on this side, and just use nuts, because it'd be easier to service that way for us. Anyways, so I got 2 jack stands here, one hauled in the back where the drive shaft would have gone, okay, and then the other holding the driver's side or left side of the T-case, right underneath where the front drive shaft is going. And you can see here, there's not a whole lot of bind. It doesn't touch. Let me move this. Get over here some more. It clears just fine. You can see the money shot here where it goes to the front diff and it clears tentatively the steering rack just fine. Now, the steering rack is just strung up here. The mounting bolt holes, as I pointed out, are probably about, see that one there, about 3-ish inches off on either side. Okay, so I'm not ignoring that it's obviously not a direct bolt because the other one is here and the strap is here. So you can see, you know, there's a couple inches difference between the bolt hole, where is that, here, to where that strap is. About, you know, 3 inches or so. So they make tie rod extension kits that will help make up the difference on either side. And what will probably end up happening is the car will steer easier to the right side versus the left side because it'll be short on that side. But at the end of the day, it won't be the only all-wheel drive car in history to have that favor. I want to say the Evo 8s and 9s had the same problem where they turned easier on one side, vice the other. And I believe its front differential is mounted not too far off from where this one is on the Evos. Anyways, as you can see, it's really not that bad. It's really not. You can see where the front diff will probably sit up a little bit higher, so it won't even touch those lines. And if that's the case, I really genuinely feel we're in there like swimwear, right? Because obviously that would be the bottom of the pan, more or less. It won't sit on top of the K-member, probably an inch or two higher up, which would give us the clearance we need on these lines. And then it's just a matter of seeing how much of this needs to move left, right, up, or down, and then making the necessary accommodations. But so far, that looks like that's going to clear just fine. And even sitting directly on the K-member, which is what the front diff is doing, I can turn this with a little bit of effort, right? I don't want to dick with it too much because it's just, you know, sitting up there, but that will rotate. See, that will rotate a little bit. That's not so bad, all things considered. So, like I said, it's not nearly the task so far that I thought it was going to be to get this where I'm at. And if you look here, these have flat sides to them, so that's when I try to, you know, turn it, it turns kind of wonky because it's got flat edges on it. But that half shaft's about where it needs to be. That one's about where it needs to be. Here, let's see here. Yeah, that's about where it needs to be. And now it's just a matter of getting a dummy block and some engine brackets and just making it happen. I think I'll be even more surprised once I get the engine sitting in here, now that I have the transfer case, the front drive shaft. As you can see, that's got plenty of space. Even if this comes up some, that won't be an issue. Like, it just won't be an issue. We might have to modify this a teeny bit. Since this is just rubber and there's like a metal coupling on the inside, I should have cut and notched this for the sake of fitment and test fitting to get a line in there. And hell, I might be able to cut the rubber and notch that with the hard piece underneath that keeps it from separating and just run that for a minute until I have a different solution. But for all you DIY types who've always been curious of what it'd be like to turn your, you know, GTOs all-wheel drive, this is video evidence that it's not that bad. It's not that bad. If I had engine brackets to sit on these mounts here and here from the Adventura, I would probably just say fuck it and just put that engine back in the car with those brackets on there for the sake of figuring out where the rack needs to sit. Once I figure out where the rack needs to sit, it's just a matter of making brackets, figuring out what how long of extension I need, which I can make. I can just as easily go to Fastenal, and I think it's M16 by 2 is the thread pitch. Get some male and female, like some rod, all thread rod, and a female coupling to put on the ends of these inner tie rods, and then give me the length I need for the outers to, you know, adjust accordingly. And like I said, the driver's side, the US driver's side, will come up a little bit short because that'll be the steering gearbox itself will be closer to the wheel by a little bit, by 3 inches or so, than the passenger side. So that there will be a little bit there, but turning left won't be the issue. Turning right might be, if it's an issue at all. So like Paul Dimmer had pointed out, I might have some bump steer issues in the rack, maybe, I don't know. And to be honest, I don't care right now because I'm just trying to prove the concept. That's why we got string and jack stands and everything eyeballing here, because we're just, before we cut and weld anything or hard mount anything, we're just trying to make sure that the concept is feasible without doing anything crazy. And so far, shifting a rack to the left and making new brackets and then compensating on the tie rod ends, and maybe having coming up short a little bit, making turns. And when I mean coming up short, I'm talking about like parking lot stuff. Tight maneuvering will be when you will notice the lock-to-lock shortcomings of the car. But this isn't a daily driver. And even if it was, I wouldn't care, because at this point, it's all about fun. And so having an all-wheel drive converted LS sloppy-esque build in a car that currently is dirt cheap, they literally can't give these things away. So to have an alternative of a way to build this car with parts that I didn't spend a whole lot of money for, I think I got $1,200, $1,300, and all the adventure parts you're looking at here, plus shipping. Granted, I had to pick it up in Indiana. So you figure, realistically, you can pick up a GTO on Marketplace right now, LS1 car or a really ragged out LS2 car, automatic. So that transmission theoretically will bolt directly to this transfer case for about $7,500. Okay, hear me out. $7,500 car, $1,500 in parts, a little bit of elbow grease, and some ching chang whirlybirds off of Amazon or eBay or whatever your favorite overseas source is. You could have a really serious car for under 10 grand. Just putting it out there. Listen, I'm excited, probably getting a little ahead of myself. I'm just laying it out there, guys, where my logic was when I decided to pull the trigger on this project. And so far, like all of you have seen up to this point, it doesn't seem terribly bad compared to other projects. There's a dude out there, I forget his name, who has an all-wheel drive converted IS 300 with a 2J in it. This car's fast as fuck. Like, it's stupid fast. It's a no-prep car. If he can build an all-wheel drive IS 300 using Toyota parts from God knows where, and then figuring out all the fab and special stuff he had to do to make that car work, we have, for this project here, for the VZ platform, is a walk in the park by comparison, because we have an all-wheel drive version to pull parts directly from that just needs, so far, a like really minor fabrication and some moving around to make work. And we're using a much better platform, arguably, in my opinion. The LS platform is 10 times what the 2JZ will ever be on its best day. And I know there's 2JZ guys that's out there to give me a hard time. Listen, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, the LS power plant is head and shoulders better than the 2JZ will ever be on its best day. Okay, and you're talking about a iron block inline 6 that's 30 years old versus we'll say an iron block 5.3 liter that's 25-ish years old, because it ended up in the trucks before it got into the cars, right? So the engines are about the same age. The aftermarket are arguably the same, but dollar for dollar, we're going to make more power with the V8 chassis and a car that came with that V8 that just needs some front end modifications to have traction enhancement, which is the one thing the GTO struggled with the most, was traction. That's why everybody hated this car, because you couldn't put a tire underneath it. Even when you mini tubbed it, you still couldn't really put a tire underneath it. Well, you just saw that might not be an issue anymore. So I'm excited. This is shaping up to be pretty promising. If you see here, the rack looks a little higher on the driver's side versus the passenger side. It's because there's a little bit of trimming in here, back there, that I'm going to have to do so that sits level. Again, not a big deal, because I'm going to have to trim that, level the rack back out, and probably make mounts to have it sit up to meet that, or cut this extend it down a teeny bit, and weld it back up with a thick piece of extended metal, whichever works first, or probably cut the shaft and put a collar on it. That'll probably be the easiest way to make sure it stays true. Weld the collar up on both ends, and then I'm done. And that way this can sit low and clear that to, with as much ease as possible and keep it moving. So that's where we're at on that, man. Oh, and also on the wheels, I put the extra spacers I had, this thick one here, and I sat it in the back. The studs are not long enough, but I just sat the wheel on there, and it brings it out quite a bit more to the front. It's kind of hard to see, but they're a little bit closer level. Understand too, these are 18 by like 11 or 12s, and those are 17 by 13s. I'm just going to get the adapter. There's a bolt-on adapter on this wheel that has studs in it, and I'm going to put the same pair on the rear, and that should make them even. And as long as that happens, like I said, with minimal effort, I'm fine with it. Obviously, I'm going to need over fenders, front and rear, especially in the rear. See right there? See, it's kind of level with the most part of the fender up here, but over fenders will bring that, should even that out. And so, like I said, since that is pretty much the case, I'm not worried about those. I just want to make sure I have a solution for the wheels before I get there. Not that I need the wheel solution to be permanent or absolute. It's just, there's a lot of moving parts to this project, and so I kind of want to make sure that I have an idea for each step. So when I have a little downtime like now, with one section, I can just work on what I was working on the next section and still make progress all the same. All things considered, the car is actually really close to driving. It may not seem that way, but since I'm missing parts and I don't have the ability to verify some hunches, I can't fabricate anything to make anything permanent so I can move on to the next thing. So here's where we're at. Ooh, get my billy chair. Here's where we're at. I need to figure out the engine bracket issue, obviously, because without an engine permanently mounted in a car, there's not a whole lot that you can do, right? But the bracket issue in and of itself is fairly minor. Anybody who's done an engine swap of any kind knows that. Outside of that, the transfer case being partially mounted in the car is nice because it lets me verify the front drive shaft distance to make sure that wherever I think things are placed is right about where they are, where they need to be. And since the drive shaft ended up where it's at, plus or minus, half an inch or so, depending on how it levels out when you level out the transfer case and everything, I know the front diff is right about where it needs to be. Okay, so I know outside of it going up a couple inches, that's where the drive line where it's laid out is where it's going to be at, more or less. Since all of that is confirmed, all I got to do now is make everything permanent and figure out a driveline solution with the transmission. So, tentatively, I want to convert the Corvette spec or Corvette configured TR6060s. I have one Z06 spec with broken pieces inside and one non-Z06 spec with broken pieces inside. And so with that, I gotta figure out what's the best way to go because TR6060s are not cheap to build. Now, I might, after thinking about it, temporarily get a hold of a 4L65 because that's what came in the Aventra. See if it bolts up to the transfer case like I think it does, and just put that in the car for the sake of the car running. If I do that, the one-piece drive shaft that I have should fit, depending on how much shorter the Adventure's rear drive shaft was. Again, for the sake of the car running sooner rather than later. And that would super suck because I have a very expensive S1 Technologies sequential shifter in the car that I don't think I'll be able to use because that's for a T56. And then I have to get a brain for the transmission itself. But I have a Haltech Elite 2500 that I got on a smoking deal that should run the 4L65 and the LS or LM7 or whatever the 5.3 is numerically just fine. I just have to get a harness built for both so that the standalone can talk to it. That's like worst case scenario want to get the car running low on funds project-wise. Because remember, outside of MonkeyFab Garage, which is sponsoring the Turbo Kit, I don't have any sponsors for this build. Everything is getting done out of pocket. And I'm not complaining, I'm not the only guy. The only one, I'm just saying, for anybody who wants to see this thing done, understand I'm working at the speed of my budget, okay? And then I'm also trying to launch the custom Gen 3 intake manifold product, as well as getting this tail shaft design launch for you guys that are doing this TR66 conversion on your Adventures and Vauxhalls. That's the brand it was sold under in Europe. It was the Vauxhall, Monaro, and the Vauxhall whatever else. It's who got what we know as the GTO, or what the Australians know as the Monaro and the Commodore in the UK. So I got a lot of irons in the fire. This car is obviously up on the list, but launching products and creating more income so I can, more easily finish said car is further up the list. It's been sitting for a long time, and it did technically run until I took the engine out because we're changing the driveline configuration. However, it's for the better. Plus, it's going to need some body work, looking at the mini dents that have occurred from it sitting where it's sitting on welded on jack stands with kids and all that stuff that comes with being a dad. But yeah, man, as of right now today, looking at it, we are a couple of minor fabrication things away from being able to say we have a functioning or functional all-wheel drive GTO. Now, obviously, with the rear drive shaft and all that kind of stuff, but what we're concerned about is the front. The drive shaft's not a big deal. Cut it down to length, measure it, take it to a drive shaft shop, have them cut it down to length, rebalance it, done. It's the same gear ratio as the front, because Holden in their infinite wisdom put 346 rears, 346 fronts, which is part of the reason what makes this swap so appealing. It's because Holden did a lot of the work for you. We just have to order some stuff from Australia. And considering how hardcore Australians are of car enthusiasts, just looking at you, Aussies, it's not a big deal. Those guys have been super supportive of this project and super helpful, super knowledgeable, and all the things. So we're making some pretty good strides on this build up to this point. So anybody who's following me, man, just be patient. Be patient, because now that I'm thinking, I might grab a 4065 once I confirm that it's more or less the same. The one we got, it's the same as what we'll need to put in this thing, or I'll probably have to source one out of a Trailblazer SS, since those came all-wheel drive, and that transmission theoretically should be configured the way it needs to be for the transfer case to bolt back into it, because it got a transfer case too, but it got a different one. So we'll see. But yeah, man, that's all I got for today. So thanks for watching.